Kia ora.
Welcome back to Video Drones. I'm Hannah Hart.
And I'm Nick Hart.
And we haven't made a review for a couple of weeks because we had some pretty unfortunate news hit us and we've just been kind of trying to cope with that. One of the ways I've always coped with unfortunate news is by watching TV and movies. My parents bought me a wee TV with a video, a little VCR thing you could put in it, and that's how I kind of dealt with whatever was going on for me, and we both kind of do cope with things by immersing ourselves into fantasy worlds. Though this film wasn't terribly immersive, it was more kind of irritating, I thought. So, I mean, we do it all the time anyway, even if there's nothing bad going on. I guess it's sort of like a kind of a different vibe when we're watching stuff because everything's going well, as opposed to watching stuff when we're trying to ignore some creeping horror in the background, you know? But I wrote this review at like 5 a.m. after watching Men. Nick was asleep, and it just got under my skin, not in a good way. And it was briefly up on IMBD, but then either someone reported it.
Took it down and censored her. So we're going to uncensor her today.
Dear, they censor me. So yeah, well, it's my channel, so I can do what I want. But either someone reported me, some prude, or maybe IMBD didn't think it was really fitting. But I'm going to read it out for you here now, and then we're going to discuss the film. So I do go into more depth about what I talk about briefly in my review. So that'll be fun. But I'm going to try and keep it kind of concise. And it's actually quite hard to read aloud things that you've written sometimes, so I'll do my best. Okay.
Sure, you'll do fine.
I think I called it, this film cemented my dislike for Alex Garland. Garland. I have a really good way of messing up names. Garland, not Gardner. Garland. Alex Garland. I adore body horror. I adore folk horror. The out-of-season apples were immediately jarring, but a Green Man and a Sheela-na-Gig, Gayle Rankin, aka Sheila from Glow, those colours, the cinematography, nature depicted with a Tarkovsky-like eye, dead deer and falling apples akin to the tumbling walnuts of Lars von Trier's Antichrist, count me in. But despite all these elements, I was rolling my eyes until my brain hurt. Yes, it's very picturesque, and the effects are some of the best I've ever seen. The acting is great. Regardless, I disliked the essence of the film so intensely none of that mattered. In fact, I audibly groaned out loud in disgust when the film ended. I really did. I was like, ugh! You know, and that's not a good sign, people. I appreciate films that assume the audience is intelligent, that don't spell everything out. I love movies that leave you with questions. But the message was so overt and heavy-handed while claiming to be both profound and subtle. It's just ridiculous. I've even personally experienced partners threatening to kill themselves when I told them it was over, not that they ever followed through, and even stick their hand through a cat door trying to get at me when I wouldn't open the door. But so I assumed there would be some insight or connection there for me. But none of that really happened. None of it really goes anywhere. It's irritating. It was also disappointingly predictable, with certain wounds being mirrored to bang home the overwrought yet clear connection between past and present. I mean, the kid in the film says, "Let's play hide and seek. You hide, I'll seek." And wow, that's exactly what unfolds. Who could have known? It's so deep. Alex is a fantastic writer for other people. He covered the horror of male brutality so well in 28 Weeks Later, which I find to be quite a feminist film and very ahead of its time. But every single one of his works, though initially very impressive, leaves me with the most irritating blue balls sensation. They're so good, so promising, and then blah. It's like the most amazing foreplay you've ever had. And it's building up, and right when the penetration finally happens, nothing. Zip. Nada. The foreplay is irrelevant because all you can remember is the complete lack of satisfaction. You're like, really? That's where you went with that? That's the direction you went in? Seriously? But Alex is there, sweaty, beaming, immensely proud of himself and absurdly cocky, saying, "Wasn't that deep, babe? Wasn't that profound? You felt that too, right? I mean, you aren't too ignorant and uneducated to understand what I meant symbolically, are you? Do you want me to explain it to you again?" And all you can do is back away, scrub yourself furiously, block his number, move house, religiously rewatch Stalker again and again until you can shake off the immensely icky feeling that has pervaded your being. In a way, it's a reaction to not all men, because yes, it is literally all men in this film, from youth to old age to a godlike level. All lurking in the periphery, all forcing their shitty takes on women. Crusty old patriarchal religion, victim shaming and creepy priests. All men demand and crave and demean and are jealous of women, the power of their sex, their mysterious ways, and will gaslight and victim shame to get them what they want. This is an intergenerational curse that will always continue, as shown very explicitly in a certain scene, and women will always have to deal with men's neediness, their petulant demands for love. I don't see how this will sit well with even the most militant feminist, because the message is so overt and clumsy, like misogyny has passed through the generations, hitting women is bad, emotional abuse is bad, and written by a smug dude who won't take any feedback from anyone. Pagans won't like the misappropriation of the Green Man, and it won't sit well with incel types either. So maybe only pseudo-intellectual Alex Garland fanboys, which are like the worst, the kind of guy that proudly informs you he's a feminist within an hour of meeting and then tells you that they hated Mad Max Fury Road. And those wanting to appear like they're progressive and woke, or into arty film or whatever. This is a messy slaughter of what could have been a great story. So that's what I wasn't allowed to say. Shut up. I'm glad you liked that. I guess that's why we were together, because you didn't hate me for that. Yeah.
I'm glad you read it, because people's writing, can sound different to their speech sometimes.
It's really weird. I've never really read one of my reviews out loud, so it was strange. Yeah.
It's great. You did a good job.
Thanks. So, should we just give a wee brief rundown of the actual synopsis, the plot, what happens?
Yeah.
We've got Rory Kinnear. Or Kinnear?
Kinnear.
It is Kinnear. He was...
He's great,
He's so good. He was in Penny Dreadful, which is this great series. It's a little bit trashy, but it's kind of actually fantastic as well.
My dad loves it.
It's very addictive, and it's got lots of nods to all these very famous people of the Victorian Edwardian era. It's really good, and he plays John Clare, named after the poet, / the creature of Frankenstein's tales. He was also the Prime Minister in Black Mirror's notorious The National Anthem episode, the pig one. You remember that? That actually put me off watching the series for years, because I was like, if this is what the show's going to be like, I don't know about this. But he's very good in it. I
found it funny.
Yeah, no, I was like, what is this? And Jessie Buckley, who's also the lost daughter. I'm thinking of ending things. I'm not a huge fan of her. Sorry. It's like
she's alright.
She's alright. She's a very good actress, but there's just something I'm not crazy about with her. But maybe it's a Jessie thing, because I don't like Jessie Plemons either.
Yeah, maybe.
That's so mean. So a woman loses her abusive husband to likely suicide, which is kind of a worst nightmare scenario for anyone.
Could be an accident.
Could be an accident. And that not knowing is probably what's driving her kind of really crazy. And that isn't worst nightmare for people who have had partners say, I'll kill myself if you leave, which a lot of us have experienced. But, I'm a woman and I can identify with the story, but it just didn't really ring true at all. It just all seemed a bit off. I think the fact that maybe he probably was unlikely to have talked to any actual woman in the making of this. She said something about how he's not...
I'm sure he just talked to his wife quite a lot, if he has a wife. I think he does, because he has kids.
He has kids, yeah.
But yeah, I'm sure she would be the main person he spoke to.
I wonder if because her character Harper, she's eating a grapefruit for breakfast, and I was like, isn't that kind of outdated? Women eating, that kind of denotes you're on
why is certain food being outdated? What do you mean?
Well, it's kind of like women used to eat grapefruit in the morning if they're on diets. It was this whole thing. It's supposed to speed up your metabolism.
I'm sure there are some men that eat grapefruits too.
But it's just, I've only ever seen women eating grapefruit. It's like in Mad Men, she eats the grapefruit it's like a real kind of old trope.
Well, maybe he wasn't trying to push any kind of meaning with it. Maybe it's just a thing.
It's just weird though. It's sort of, no, I've never seen a man eat a grapefruit in a movie. And what, are we supposed to think she's on a diet? Is that what women do? We diet by eating grapefruit in the morning? I don't know, it was weird. Because if everything's symbolic, well then that has meaning. That's
maybe not everything is symbolic.
Well, I don't know, I thought it was weird. I thought it was a weird touch. But yeah, so she takes off for a fortnight, and Gets this obscenely large house for one person.
Yeah.
Well, it would make you feel
Sort
quite...
of unnecessarily large.
It's so large. It's like if you're trying to like heal and recuperate from what's happened from a trauma, rattling around in like a massive house.
But he does sort of cover his ass by her saying to her friend on the phone, I think I outdid myself, or something like that.
Yeah, might have gone a little bit too far.
Yeah.
But still, yeah, it was a bit... But, the house is lovely. I mean, it's in nature.
Yeah, they probably just, he probably wrote a big house because that particular location was quite splendid to look at.
Yes. But it kind of seemed like it was a bit of a lazy writing around kind of quite a strange... It just didn't really fit very well. And then, of course, the friend does sort of, that conversation with his friend kind of justifies it, but it still felt really strange. I mean, what I was kind of hoping for was like a thoughtful examination of grief and trauma, because that seems to be about the themes, or maybe even a complex relationship to nature, but it kind of became quite a preachy and overwrought tale of men's need to be loved and vagina envy, which is quite a cool theme, but the way it was done was quite weird. And also Garland's like obsession, his 15-year obsession with the Green Man, and more about how he looked and how he moved rather than kind of what he's supposed to represent. And he said that he wanted to make the film that could be open to interpretation and not easily explained. But then he inserts a bunch of symbols and visual analogies that make his intentions like actually extremely clear.
He sort of bashes it over people's heads.
He really does. Yeah. So, I mean, the Green Man, shall I go into a little bit about what the Green Man...
Sure.
I know a bit about the Green Man and the Sheela-na-Gig, but I did some extra research just to make sure that what I previously knew kind of lines up with what I know. So the Green Man is an ancient symbol of rebirth and the cycle of growth and spring. And so, of course, this film is set in spring, which is great, it looks beautiful. But there's this really jarring, immediate thing that I was like, hey, wait a second. In this lush... early springtime that's beautifully captured, there is an apple tree with like foliage that it wouldn't have in spring, and it's got fully ripe apples. And I looked...
And she eats the apple, which is, in my opinion, why he included it, because he wanted to bash that symbolism of Eve home, Adam and Eve.
Yeah,
but then it doesn't really go anywhere.
Well, if it does go anywhere, it becomes very muddled with like pagan history, but not in a good way, not like it's like offering any new insight. I just thought it was like so annoying to see something that doesn't fit into the season. And I know that's what it's like in New Zealand, but I even looked up the UK, and their apple season is like autumn. In winter, apple trees, the apples are dead, the leaves are gone, you don't get apples at that time of the year. So I thought that was a bit odd. Yeah, so, I mean, and also, if it's an allusion to Eve, Eve starts off as kind of perfect. She loses her innocence, she gains knowledge, she becomes ashamed of her nudity, and was cast out of the garden. But I didn't see any of that kind of thing going on in the film. And then if the Green Man is the symbol of, who's actually a symbol of nature and an environmental guardian, is like the serpent or the devil... Are you saying that paganism is inherently evil and connected to Satan? And I don't know, and then who's Adam in this story? Like, it just kind of, I mean, if he's so into symbolism and studying these types of things, like, why did he try to combine those two mythologies so poorly? Yeah, I don't know. I mean, is he saying that the Green Man is kind of like God's nemesis? And Green Man would never lurk around and stalk women. That wasn't the essence of the Green Man. I mean, you see his carvings of the Green Man in European countrysides, sort of like the male aspect of the spirit, but also nature itself. But nature's also depicted as being female, so that's quite interesting. It's almost like nature's male expression of itself. It's connected to the feminine, so it's not trying to harm the feminine in any way. The Green Man also is all about dismemberment, reintegration with the earth, which he really gets into quite heavy-handedly. But those ideas originated with the goddess Inanna in Sumeria, and then Osiris and Isis's story in Egypt, and then moved into Jesus being like resurrected. So that's a very, very ancient idea of dismemberment and regeneration, which also lines up with the seasons. It's always kind of been like about the seasons and what that sort of means about the return of life after the death of winter. Pagan itself means of the countryside, so yeah, it's on the countryside, that matches up. But yeah, Green Man was never a figure that was supposed to be ominous or frightening towards women. certainly Christianity has a lot of figures that are quite, not exactly nurturing of the feminine spirit, which we sort of see in the guise of a priest that's sort of represented. His performances, Rory's, is Rory right?
Yeah,
Rory, his performances are so good. He plays all these different characters and he does it so well.
I found him very scary as the priest and the boy. I thought those were quite terrifying.
Yes, it was very clearly about sort of like the attitudes that children have and the way that they grow up. And the priest was, man, he was so good. He was actually quite creepy. That was probably the creepiest part of the whole thing.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, and the Sheela-na-Gigs, Sheila or Sheila of the vagina, they're very common in Ireland, and there's some in the UK and France. Medieval churches often have them, like the Green Man, so that's kind of accurate. You wouldn't really see them together though, like they were in the carving in the film, but we've unfortunately lost definitively the meaning that Sheela-na-Gigs originally had. I mean, some people think it was a way of Christianity to kind of convince the pagans to accept their beliefs and gods to some degree by incorporating them into the church, to help convince them to leave the goddesses and nature worship of, and for the Industrial Revolution and patriarchy instead, which is a good move in my idea. They also were considered like a form of amulet, these figurines. In fact, vulvas were just considered a literal badge of protection. Plutarch, the Greek essayist, actually said all women need to do to end a war is to lift up their skirts. So, pretty amazing quote. And illustrations up to the...
I've never heard that.
Yeah, that's all we need to do is just need to... That actually would probably...
It's probably quite true.
It's probably quite true. We should go to maybe when people should go to the Ukraine and just lift up their skirts. Though, with drones and all the kind of technology we have, it's not quite the same as what it was like in ancient Greece. And I mean, and there's some really neat illustrations right up until the 1800s of women lifting their skirts to scare the devil away. But Harper's character doesn't ever really get to the point of lifting the skirts to scare anything away. She just kind of like stops running away from it. So that's not really a very good connection there. In fact, in Ireland recently, those Sheela-na-Gigs have been kind of reclaimed. Last year, new Sheilas crafted in clay with 22-carat gold-glustered labia and beautifully glazed vulvas were quietly placed in sites that were significant to women's struggle. Of course, there was a time when British men saw these as evil symbols of lust, but Dr. Barbara Freitag, who wrote a book about Sheilas, which I think is pretty unlikely that Garland actually read, in 2004.
I'm sure he did a bit of research.
Maybe would he have read the book? Because if he
I don't know if he read that one.
It seems like the book on Sheela-na-Gigs, at least kind of in modern history. And she found evidence they were more likely to be amulets of sympathetic magic, which is objects you touch to receive their power, talismans or representative of a goddess. But in fact, she said that fertility was always the first word that came up in association with these figures. One of the women she spoke to told her at lambing time that farmers still present a ewe to the Sheila in the hope that it would lead to a fertile spring. They are a rural phenomena because these people relied on life-giving power. So they are kind of the two sides of the same coin, that's for sure. And I like how Garland did sort of depict that in this sculpture. It's also quite likely to have been a symbol of protection for midwives because, giving birth was very dangerous for the mother and child for eons. It still kind of is now, but not nearly like it was for those giving birth, because you'd want to loosen up the vulva with butter to stretch it for an easier birth because it can cause terrible damage giving birth. I mean, women still rub the vulvas of these carvings in the hopes of becoming fertile or easy birthing. So it's not about sexuality or seduction. It's more about, can I have an easy birth and fertility? And funnily enough, I think you've probably noticed this with us both growing up, that the term Sheila, she's a good Sheila. Yeah, she's a Sheila.
In Australasia.
Yeah, Australia and New Zealand quite often, and it's used in a really positive term usually. She's a good Sheila. So I think that maybe that kind of represent the very European stock we come from, and it's sort of like a colonial hangover, a fate whisper of our pagan past that comes. It's still here, so we kind of still do use the term Sheila in Australasia. But I think my interpretation is, because it's all open to interpretation, is that perhaps it's also a symbol of a woman who has borne many children, the power and strength of someone able to bear multiple lives, seen as something sacred and special rather than the butt of jokes like it is today. The triangle is one of the oldest images that humans have ever made, and with the point down it represents the vulva, which I've got tattooed on this finger here. because I really like to be married to the matriarchal way of life, and that sacred feminine divine energy. And it's sort of all about how it comes into the world, which is our origins, life itself. And the feminine, actually, these sort of, symbols, they aren't necessarily theoretically male or female. It's kind of wider than that. It's an energy considered to be of the earth. Caves also represent like the vagina, and they are entrance ways to the inner secrets of the planet. I'd say it's not just like a planetary energy. It's not just of our planet. I'd say that the universe itself is feminine, a creative force, one of life. You could say that the opposite of this is a destructive force, a void, which would in this case be masculine. But there should always be a balance of these two forces, because it often feels like we're imploding due to an imbalance of these energies in our hyper-capitalist patriarchal society that would rather destroy the earth and its resources for individual profit than only take what is necessary. So yeah, that's a lot actually. I've said a lot there, but that's kind
Glad you did.
Well, I really wanted to explain what Sheela-na-Gig and what the Green Man generally represent, and how odd it was that Alex took that and made his own interpretation, but also tried to combine it with Christianity.
It was a bit messy.
And it's just a bit, I think he could have done a lot. He could have done something better, something different with that. And it was quite disappointing, really.
Like his other things are, usually.
Yeah, there's
like
just...
Dev's ending.
Dev's ending. I was so excited about that show. I was super into it. And then the ending, I just couldn't believe it. It was that total disappointment.
Didn't resolve, really.
Well, it resolved, but in the most, predictable way.
Okay, well, I watched an interview with him where he said that a number of collaborators that he's written something for have sort of pleaded with him to tweak make a little adjustment here or there to make it conclude in a certain way that would make it more of a classic. But he's always very strictly stuck to his guns on those areas, and maybe that's what he did here, I got the impression.
Well, it's interesting.
Although he did say A24 didn't ask him to change anything.
This is the interesting thing about it. In a similar interview, I think, he was talking about how usually he has all this pressure to do it a certain way, and then people come at him and they say, oh, you could have done this and that, and it would have been like a masterpiece, it would have been a classic, which I agree. But now he's had the opportunity to do things exactly the way he wanted, and it still had that, I groaned at the end. I groaned out loud.
We groaned many times throughout it as well.
I was just like, ugh. That's not a good sign. And it just seems kind of lazy to say, well, it's just open to interpretation. Well, not when you shove so many symbols in it and it's so heavy-handed about certain things.
You were saying you thought that that the Green Man wouldn't have done certain things. But I don't want to defend him, but I just remembered to say that you don't always have to, if you're including symbolism, you don't have to include everything from the original.
I agree, but I think they also sort of distorted this figure into something he never was. That's kind of and it's quite awful to do that, I think.
It's a horror film, though. It's good. It needs to, go in a dark direction.
Yeah.
But that's the other thing that we were talking about. We didn't think there was much horror there. I mean, the last 10 or 15 minutes of it are pretty gory, really, or bloody at least. But we didn't, apart from the priest and maybe a little bit of creepiness from the boy, it didn't really scare us,
No, and a horror film should scare you.
He has said in that same interview that I watched that that a lot of people have asked the question, what genre is this? Is it a horror? Is it a folk horror? Is it a thriller? Is it a drama? Or is it a sort of about identity politics or gender? Yeah.
And what did he say?
I think he was the one saying, what is it? No, he didn't really give an answer.
And I read some...
I think he said it's whatever you want it to be, which is a bit vague.
Like the film.
Yeah.
But it's not vague at the same time. And so Jessie Buckley said the same thing when asked about She's like,
I get the feeling that's because as an actor, she probably asked him, so what is this character, what does this mean? And he probably said, it's whatever you want it to mean, babe.
Wasn't it great though? Wasn't it fantastic? Yeah.
It did have, and I don't want to defend him really, but I do, we watched it a second time today, but always on a second time viewing a film, it seems to get better. Not always, but in a lot of cases for me. But there were some good things. The effects were amazing. They were really, really good.
I made you I quite showed you. I kind of rewound and we watched them a few times because the effects are really, really cool.
Yeah, and the acting, especially. I mean, I thought she was okay, but Rory Kinnear, he was really good.
So good.
Yeah, really, really good. And I mean, and the music as well. Like, I really like Jeff Barrow from Portishead. His music, like Portishead's album Third is really, really good, especially that one. And him and Ben Salisbury, who did the score. I thought it was good. Maybe on the first time round, it was more memorable, like the scene, especially where she does the sort of,
the echoes in a tunnel that doesn't actually echo like that because it doesn't have an end on it. So that was a little bit of a glitch.
There's a lot of little glitches in this film, aren't there?
I actually think the apple tree kind of awkwardly naturally placed within the film is kind of an analogy for the whole thing. It's this jarring, like, unnatural addition that doesn't fit with the rest of the environment.
Yeah.
And I think that's kind of, the tree to me is kind of an analogy of why this film didn't work. Right from the very start.
Well, maybe that's the point. Maybe he wants it to be jarring and like something isn't right in this house or this property,
I just think that he needed that as part of the script and he just didn't want to take it out. So he went, oh well, it's also autumn, even though it's spring.
But anyway, this score was good, but it wasn't. It was probably one of the better things about the film for me. But it's still, if I have lots of soundtracks in my phone, but I would never put that one on because it's just not that enjoyable to listen to. It's quite kind of forgettable.
It actually got kind of annoying too, especially on the second viewing. Her little like echoing thing actually kind of really. I was like, oh, no, not like this. We were actually really excited at first.
Oh
because
I wanted to love it.
We really wanted to love it. I mean, the same producer I think worked with Perfume Genius, made this incredible album. This really good with sound.
The idea of him, Garland doing a horror film again was really exciting. Because 28 Days Later was great. Very good. But it was, just a disappointment in my eyes.
Yeah. I mean, maybe I'm being a bit harsh, but also that's what reviewers do.
You're a reviewer, so this is your opinion. So
I've been doing it since I was 18, like, I do...
People are allowed to disagree with it. In fact, we beg you, please disagree with us in the comments.
But just make it a decent argument rather than that sucked, because that's like, just like give us something more than that. If you've got an opinion... maybe just flesh it out a little bit. Tell us why. Flesh it out a little bit more. Explain what you maybe thought he was trying to symbolize and how he succeeded in that. If there's something we missed. I wish him all the best, but I mean, I just think he should go back to writing for other people because I don't know. And the sort of people that love his films and love A4, like it's a bit like Rick and Morty. I loved Rick and Morty when it first started, but then the fandom just made it just so cringy, and I'm afraid that. We're on an A4 like Facebook group page, and it's A24, sorry, and it's just it's kind of making me not like them.
I actually unfollowed that group today.
You did,
because I fucking get notifications every time I go on Facebook, and it irritates me. It's making me hate A24 just because of whingy people kind of saying how much they love Midsummer or something like that
over and over and over again.
Yeah, which is a good film. I'm not saying I don't like it, but just bashes you on the head. But he does seem to have his own subset of fandom going on, like Nolan does as well. Christ Nolan, who I call him.
Christ Nolan. That sort of like rabid, single-minded fanboy, fangirl kind of. Well, I can't know.
You can say whatever we want.
Incels would hate him though, surely. Like,
well, maybe.
I did look up some reviews on IMBD, and basically anyone who's in any way remotely like not kind of a bit more progressive just hated it because it, you know, was like, men are bad, okay. So
And one time I did cringe when we watched it today. Watching it the second time was when the film started and it broke into that such white bread folk music that he's perpetually flirting with. It's just like he did it on Devs as well. He seems to love it, and it just puts the hackles up on my back.
yeah.
It's very bland, and he could use something a lot more exciting for the film.
I mean, to be fair, it is about the English countryside,
Yeah, I was
which
just
is
gonna say,
very
it
white
does
bread
represent
folk.
the English countryside, which is as grey and dismal as it is in the film.
It's like who's that there's that musician that everyone gets really excited about, that folky one, and they're all like, oh, he's so great, but he's really not.
Devendra Bernhardt.
No,
Whatever his name is. I don't even know
got some
that.
good stuff. There was like, he came to New Zealand recently, and like, well, not a few years ago, and everyone sort of got all crazy about him, and like his film was at the end of that really I can't remember the names of things, but it was like one of those like, yeah, like white folk singing type people that is really oversaturated.
Yeah, I'm not into folk music, so I should say that actually. Nick Drake's good. There are a few people.
I quite like folk music,
that are
some
okay.
of it, but not much of it.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's a shame. I don't know, it wasn't a good start for Nick with that, and it wasn't a good start for me with the apple tree.
We are big folk horror fans, though.
Yeah,
we
huge folk horror fans.
Watched that folk horror documentary recently, which is amazing. It's very fun.
It took us ages to get through it because we kept stuffing it to like look up the movies that it was
Yeah.
referencing and make little notes and stuff. So yeah, folk horror is a fantastic genre. I mean, I suppose this is quite an interesting addition to it.
I should say that documentary, can't remember the full name, but if you want to look it up, it starts with Woodlands. Woodlands Dark and Deep or something like that. So look it up. It's really, really
so good. And it gives you heaps of information about how to track down the best of the best.
And they do try and cover a lot of different parts of the world as well, which is really important. Starts with the UK, then America, then Asia, and Spain, things like that.
Such a good documentary. I would much rather watch that again.
Yeah, same.
And again.
Yeah.
So yeah, we did really want to like this, and because I mean, like, I thought, well, yeah, because like a lot of the times I think maybe his work has just been bleh at the end because of outside pressure, but now that he had the chance to really do it, I was really looking forward to it. He also mentioned that he was inspired somewhat by Attack on Titan, which is a really good anime.
Good because his child was watching it. Kid
was getting
daughter,
his daughter.
I think.
Good on her for getting her dad into Attack on Titan. Oh, and the thing is, I think there's this birthing scene that some people might think is really like, might be quite shocking to them or something they haven't seen before.
It's
but
a horror film.
But like, and also I've seen a very similar scene, and I think it was a Japanese horror, and I couldn't for the life of me find out what it was that I watched. But there was like this birthing scene in that was when I first saw that, I was like, holy moly, that's pretty messed up. But now I'm just like, I've seen it.
I wanted to say something about this. Last night we watched Fried Barry, which had its own great birthing scene, and there were another not birthing, but kind of an unnatural birthing, cesarean, was Inside, or L'Intérieur, this French film. Inside, with the woman, the scary French woman breaking in, and the pregnant belly being like broken.
Which is actually like based on a true story. It actually freaking happened. Yeah, So
I love that film.
I did think that the Japanese film, I wish I could remember the title, I'm sorry I can't. I think that they did it better, and also it was way more shocking and unsettling with the whole vibe of the film. But I just kind of was like, oh, this is kind of a bit silly. Like, I really appreciated the effects. They look really good, but it was more silly to me. I did marvel at how well it was done, but at the same time I thought it was a bit silly, and I had kind of seen it before. So yeah. So I suppose we should rate it.
Yes, well, I'm curious to see what you're going to give it.
Out of 5?
Yep. I always find it easier to rate out of 10 because it gives you a little bit more leeway. Yeah. So maybe we should both rate out of 10 and then just... But then how do we make it out of 10?
We'll just both... well, like I said, there are a lot of ingredients here that should have made it work. And I don't want to, like... punish everyone that was talented that involved for not a great result.
Yeah.
But I still think I can only give it like a 3 out of 10 hearts.
Okay.
Yeah. It just...
See, because the other things I did like, and I'd probably give it like even a 5 or 6, maybe even a 6, just because of the craft, the technique involved in it. But yeah, I did think Symbolism was very heavy-handed, and it did make me cringe a lot of times, so I didn't like it that much. It's not a film that I'm going to recommend to people. I probably give it like 5.5, actually.
Yeah. So I reckon like 8.5 out of 20 hearts. We'll do it that way.
Yeah.
So yeah, really wanted to like this film, but just didn't work as far as I'm concerned. And yeah, really excited to see him go back to writing for other people. That'd be great. I'm looking forward to seeing those movies.
Well, yeah. Did you say he's gonna take a break from directing?
Apparently, yeah. He's working on one at the moment, and he's just like done because he's just done too much. And he has been doing things sort of back to back. Yeah, it's given it a good run.
I didn't mind Annihilation, actually.
Yeah, but once again, the ending was like.
Yeah, he doesn't know how to
builds it up, and then you're just like, yeah, and then it's like, oh.
He's not good with endings.
No, he's really not. Not good. So yeah, that's us for another week. We're doing what, Kurosawa?
Kiyoshi Kurosawa next week. He's a great underrated Japanese director. He's done a lot of films. He did Pulse and Cure, which are probably his most well-known films. They're horrors. He's done quite a few horrors, actually. He did one called Creepy as well.
Creepy?
Yep.
He's freaking amazing, and it's so weird that I hadn't heard about him. He's not that big, but he really should be. He's almost like Tarkovsky in that he does things, and I'm like, how did he do that? And I'll rewind and watch, and I'm like, I still don't know how he did that.
He's definitely a Tarkovsky fan.
Oh, he's incredible.
Read him saying that.
So that'll be really nice to like watch something we really. I mean, I've only seen a couple of his films, so I'm really looking forward to seeing more because I just love him. Well, yeah. Well, let us know what you think. Go hard. Just make it a decent argument, if you could. That'd be great. See you later.
See ya.
Bye.